a country, South Africa, is experiencing what we call xenophobic violence. And of course, there are very many people who are saying that that is black to black crime. But even such a distinction to us appears very academic. But the fact is that in South Africa, what is happening is that native South Africans are killing foreigners in that country. And for us on our part, we are saddened because Uganda as a country and the rest of Africa sacrificed a lot for the liberation of South Africa. If you are aware, the ANC armed wing, the Nkonto Wesizwe, had training grounds in the rest of Africa, and particularly even in Uganda. And it is therefore very inconceivable that a country like South Africa would choose to neglect the sacrifices, which even includes logistical sacrifices, for their liberation. And what we now see is them turning against the people who supported them in their liberation struggle. What even saddens us more is that a country like Uganda has not yet issued any statement. Our Foreign Affairs Department has not made, we have not had them issue any statement. Even when world leaders, presidents of various countries, were boycotting the World Economic Forum that was supposed to happen in Cape Town, we saw President Museveni board his aeroplane to go to South Africa to attend the World Economic Forum. Now, as Uganda Young Democrats, this is we are really dumbfounded and actually confused how a head of state would choose to attend such a forum that his other peers within the African region are boycotting. Some of our members perhaps suggested that maybe our president is just excited to fly the jet on taxpayers' money, or 33 years in power has not yet dealt with his appetite of per diem. So we think we have a government that doesn't care about citizens, even when we have a lot of Ugandan nationals in South Africa whose remittance sustains the Ugandan economy, and we think the Ugandan state would have taken this issue of xenophobia very seriously. As UID, what have we done? We've done three things. At the height of the xenophobic attacks, we issued a statement as Uganda Young Democrats calling on South Africans, to the South African High Commission and South Africans to consider these sacrifices that the rest of Africa made towards their liberation. The second aspect is that our International Relations Department of the Uganda Young Democrats, we try to reach out within partner parties in South Africa. For example, we reached out to the Youth League of the Nkatha Freedom Party led by Prince Buthelezi. And I think over the weekend, you must have read South Africans also booing Prince Buthelezi for his stance against xenophobia. So we reached to the IFP. We also reached to our partner party, the ASDP, which is the African Christian Democratic Party, also with representation in the South African National Assembly, to voice our concerns about xenophobia and these aspects that are happening. And we are also glad to report that the ASDP Youth League reached out to their leadership, and they also issued a statement to that effect. Now that is the diplomatic angle. that the Uganda Young Democrats took. There was also other activities that we undertook. Particularly yesterday, we were supposed to have a very peaceful demonstration to the South African High Commission. On Friday last week, I wrote a letter to the South African High Commission informing them about our planned protest, peaceful protest, yesterday, 9th of September 2019. We wrote a letter to the South African High Commission, which copy of the letter I think was circulated and shared to you members. But here is a copy of the letter that we wrote. I think some of you can have, and this is a copy of the letter we wrote to the South African High Commission. We intended to go there and tell them about our displeasure in the manner in which they are acting, the manner in which South Africans are acting. We also wrote a letter to the Inspector General of Police, to have a very disciplined protest. And we went ahead and mobilized our membership. Yesterday, very early, students of Makerere were already here, before even DP offices could open. Later on, students from the chapter of Chambogo also arrived, and likewise Mutesa Royal University and MOOCs, where UID has very strong established structures and nearby. But the moment we arrived here yesterday, the police brought me a letter from the IGP saying that they advise that we should not go ahead with our planned protest because they think we are going to disrupt business in the central business district. And then they went ahead to even advise us that we can still send our petition to the South African embassy by email. Something we really rejected because we told them email will not show the emotion on our face. So we need to address them in persona so that they get to understand how emotive this issue is to Ugandans. And before we could even finish that argument, yesterday myself, the chairman UID Makerere, and Shafiq were arrested. We were arrested and detained yesterday at CPS and then charged with an offense of inciting violence. This is, that is the chairman's bond letters. We were only released yesterday at dusk by a team of our lawyers who came and managed to negotiate and get police bond for us. Now, this is something we really want to condemn. It appears that in Uganda, you cannot exercise your constitutional right enshrined under Article 29 of this Constitution, freedom of expression, which is a fundamental right that many people, particularly the Ugandan police, are trying to deny Ugandans. I was on the iPod Legal Committee, that committee that sat down to discuss and harmonize how political parties can operate in the face of iPod. I was on that committee by the fact of my professional background. And in there, we agreed that all of us agreed and reiterated the position in 2015 that the Attorney General and the Shadow Attorney General, Fred Ruindi and Abdu Katuntu, came up with. And they said that notifying police does not mean you're seeking permission from police. So, according to us, notifying police about our intention to hold a disciplined protest did not mean we were asking police for permission to hold the event. And so therefore, we think the actions of police were very illegal, and our team is strongly of the opinion that we should now begin testing some of these new laws like the Human Rights Enforcement Act, which allows you to sue an individual police officer for violating your rights. And this is something we are going to take very seriously. Because yesterday in police, we were really insulted. When we reached police, they removed our shoes, our watches, everything. And we were told we are under arrest for an offense of inciting violence. Now, I don't want to go into detail on the ingredients of that offense. But first of all, there was no one even available for us to incite. Secondly, we had complied with aspects of the law. And thirdly, even the planned protest had not even started before these guys could detain us. So Afande Liga, who came with plainclothes security men and arrested us from DP headquarters, should know that we are seriously condemning their action, but we are not only stopping at condemnation, we are going to sue them in person. And that is something we are taking it very seriously. We are doing this for the sake of Ugandans, so that Ugandans can exercise their freedom of expression, assembly, and protest. Besides that, as UID, we have a number of planned activities. Today, the Uganda Young Democrats should have held what we call the UID Leadership Incubator Series. Now, this was a series, this Leadership Incubator is something that was launched 2 years ago. And we've been holding this as for purposes of building capacity of our leaders in institutions and out of institutions. And this is something that we have decided to launch the second part of the series, which today should have started at Makerere University Business School. But we were asked that since our key speakers, who include the president of the party, the Secretary General, and other senior officials of the party, in the iPod Symposium on electoral reform, we should postpone it. But nevertheless, this activity is going to be rescheduled for next week. But this week on Friday, we have the same incubator series at Gulu University as the first series for this week. And next week, we are going to roll it to other institutions like Makerere University, and that is why their leadership are present here with us. There are other activities that you might also want to know. UID and DP, as you are aware, have had very stormy relationships. This is something that is already in the public, was in the public domain. I recall personally at some point, and Angela Sele were also parts of a UID faction that used to sit at Johnson Street under the leadership of Brenda Nabo Kenya, who I used to deputize as vice president. But now, there is more cohesion and more harmony. Last week, the party leadership sat at Hoima in a constitutional review conference, and in the constitutional review conference, a lot was agreed that would fundamentally change the current DP constitution. And one of the things that will definitely change will be the operations of UID. Now, UID is going to have a charter which will be appended to the DP constitution. And the effect of that charter will be that it will definitely repeal Article 23 of the DP constitution on youth. So what this means is that in the next delegates conference of the Democratic Party, which is going to happen in 6 months' time, UID will have a separate delegates conference to elect their own leaders, and the structure will resemble the current structure of the Democratic Party. UID will have its own president, will have its own vice president, its own secretary general, all these functions. What this means is that old people, as it used to happen in the DP constitution, will have no business in electing leaders for young people. So UID will have its own delegates conference, its own structure, and that is something we are working on. I am in the final stages of completing the final charter of UID, which will be approved by NEC through a formal bill, and then the delegates conference, and that will be effective. So what we hope through that approach, young people can meaningfully participate in politics, have their own space, and also take charge of their affairs. That will address the current problem that we have had in UID. The problem in UID has essentially been a transition problem, transiting from the old generation to the young generation. But now what this is bringing on board is a dispensation where young people take charge, young people elect their leaders, and then a tradition of easy transition. If you're beyond 35 years, you have no business in UID. You have to go and fight for your space in the main Democratic Party. So that UID is left for those within the age of 18 to 35, but also we are putting there a clause that participation in elections of UID will be based on national laws and statutes. Partly why DP is undergoing a constitutional review is to harmonize DP constitution with aspects of national constitution. Because the Political Parties Organization Act, which is the law that governs political parties, provides that political parties must conform to national laws. So we are doing this in compliance with aspects of national laws that regulate political party activities. Now, this also brings us to a very serious point that we want to emphasize. With us here is the leadership of the UID Makerere chapter. Now, if you look above me, there is Benedicto Chiwanuka, there is Semo Gerere, there is Sebana Kizito, and there is Norbert Mao. That is transition in leadership. Likewise, Makerere has undergone a transition of leadership from the Trevor and Julius Katerega UID to the present set of UID. But we hear that there is a group. You know, we are now going into elections, and everyone is just looking for a shortcut to win elections. That is why even others now say, okay, for us, we are now going to launch UID People Power. We are going to launch UID Nkova Zambogo, or we are going to launch UID. Now, all these multiplicities are illegal. And as UID leadership, we are going to send a charter, a student charter, to all institutions, to our branches. UID is a brand of DP, recognized by national laws of Uganda. Even the Electoral Commission recognizes UID as a reserved name for the Youth League of the Democratic Party. So anyone who is using the name of UID for purposes of election expedience should be warned, because you're dealing with an established institution with a tradition of many years. So this is the leadership of UID. So members of the press should ignore any other group of people who purport to call themselves, whether UID or UID People Power or UID whatever it is. The DP does not know them, and I am sure they do not also understand the founding documents of UID and also the constitution of UID. So we warn them, and I am going to personally engage them. These are people I personally know. I am going to reach out to them and tell them, explain to them that, you see, what you're doing is illegal, is katemba, comedy, that you should desist from. Another activity that is key that we are going to have is, we are going to have a reunion of all members of the Democratic Party who have undergone various capacity building programs. We've had a lot of capacity building programs. We've had the election bridge, which has happened in various countries. We've had program for young politicians in Africa, Piper. And we've also had a number of our own capacity building programs. We are soon going to roll them up so that the young people who have had the opportunity to benefit, to speak and inspire our young people to this. Finally, I have a message from the Democratic Party for you people. And the Democratic Party is concerned about electoral demarcation, the current demarcation of electoral areas that is happening in the country. The Democratic Party thinks that some of these areas they are demarcating are intended to advantage a particular player in the next general election, and that is the NRM. Because there is no sufficient information about this by the Electoral Commission that has been circulated countrywide. So the Democratic Party thinks that this hoarding of information by the Electoral Commission about this very important exercise happening countrywide is intended to only advantage one section of a political player, and that is NRM. And also the election demarcation exercise are being done elsewhere, particularly in upcountry areas. That is where they are prioritizing. In towns and cities where people are vigilant, there is no serious exercise happening. Meaning, they think that they can actually add more polling stations in areas where they can rig without serious scrutiny by vigilant citizen groups. The Democratic Party also thinks that in the absence of transparent information regarding this exercise, government is conniving. Actually, the NRM is conniving with the Electoral Commission to effect gerrymandering. And you know, gerrymandering has been a feature in all Ugandan elections. In every election, you find that there are creation of new polling stations. their creation of areas, of electoral areas, and this is just an aspect. And these areas are created based on who will be the person to benefit from an election in case it happens in that area. So the Democratic Party thinks this process should be more agreeable, more consultative before it even ends. And on the same note, the Democratic Party calls all her members to be vigilant in these processes, because there are polling stations currently that are still next to army barracks, and we call upon our members to ensure that they ensure that those polling stations are moved into a more neutral ground where people can vote from. So we think that such an exercise is so important to be done stealthily, behind the carpet, and with suspect intentions. That is a message that the Democratic Party told us to pass over to you. And on our note, on this note, as UID, we are also going to take up this matter as a matter of vigilance to ensure that the next election is an election that can perhaps give hope to Ugandans. Thank you. Muluganda.